Welcome to my channel Sella Buzz. The sun had already set on Hollywood Boulevard when Clint Eastwood's black SUV pulled up to the studio's rear entrance. The security guard nodded respectfully as the final real outlaws of Hollywood emerged, his weathered face displaying no signs of the anxiety that usually befalls talk show guests you see behind the scenes. Hollywood's most significant confrontations, and tonight we're revealing the true story of Clint Eastwood's arrival on Jimmy Kimmel's stage for what should have been a normal interview, but instead ended up being flung off in a display of defiance that stunned the nation. Let's explore how one talk show segment turned into the year's most talked about television moment. Clint would have been just another circus act for the television audience if he hadn't refused to play the game on Kimmel's terms that evening. Clint Eastwood, 94, has nothing left to prove to anyone, so he came to talk about something genuine. His most recent picture is a harsh drama about a rancher battling corporate America. He is yet another legend relegated to wearing prop hats and cracking written jokes. The audience was buzzing with anticipation inside the studio as Clint Eastwood, in his 90s but still commanding respect like few others in Hollywood, was the night's main attraction. His presence alone could silence a room that iconic Squint the Growly draw that had delivered some of cinema's most memorable lines. The stakes weren't just about one man's dignity, they were about whether authenticity still has a place in the manufactured world of late-night television. Clint had never warned of the forced laughter, the polished anecdotes, the carefully choreographed spontaneity. He had agreed to this appearance for one reason: to spread the word about his film. Other than that, he simply wasn't interested in playing along backstage because the tensions were already building. And his latest film wasn't just another project. It was a story about standing your ground against forces that would crush the individual themes that had defined Eastwood's entire career both on and off screen. Clint's 20-year assistant walked quietly and efficiently, her eyes sweeping over everything with the practiced fatigue of someone who has witnessed it all. Earlier that day, she had cornered the show's producers, her voice hard but low. Mr. Eastwood is here to talk about his movie. Don't try to make him into a clown. Maggie had been around long enough to notice the look, and the producers had nodded their smiles too broadly and eagerly. They were already planning something, seeing the potential for viral moments for clips that would go viral online for days, and they wanted Clint to participate in their skits, perhaps wearing a cowboy hat and cracking jokes at his own expense. Maggie knew better. The producers disregarded her worries, and now the stage was set for conflict in the green room because Clint Eastwood didn't bend for anyone. Not the directors, the studios, or even the talk show host. Clint drank black coffee while his gaze was fixed on a monitor that showed Jimmy Kimmel practicing his opening monologue. The host was in exceptional form tonight, slicing through political gaffes and celebrity scandals with ease and practice, and the audience responded with waves of laughter. Clint's expression didn't change, but his fingers tapping slowly against his chair was a subtle clue that Maggie knew he was assessing the situation right away. Similar to how a gunfighter might evaluate an opponent prior to the draw, she whispered to a stagehand nearby, "They're going to try something." The stage manager showed up at the door, headset in place, and signaled that it was time. Clint got up without fanfare, straightened his jacket with a single effective motion, and made his way to the stage by himself, without an entourage or any fuss, just a man walking to meet whatever was waiting for him. With the ease of a man, totally at ease in his own skin, Clint Eastwood took his seat across from Jimmy Kimmel and received a standing ovation from the audience that felt more like a tribute than a welcome. The respect in the room was evident, but so was the anticipation that this wouldn't be your typical interview. Jimmy started really inquiring about the concepts of the movie: loyalty, standing your ground, and the values that motivate someone to persevere in the face of adversity. Instead of merely portraying these beliefs on television, Clint's comments were measured, deliberate, and loaded with the weight of a man who had lived them. The audience hung on every word, drawn into the seriousness of his genuine. It had an almost hypnotic quality. It wasn't the usual Hollywood star's rehearsed charm, but rather a rarer, more sincere conviction that sensed the audience's keen attention to Clint's solemn tone. The complexity of the conversation seemed to unnerve Jimmy as he moved in his chair. Talk show presenters rely on keeping things lighthearted, shifting from subject to subject without lingering too long on anything too serious, while wearing an artificial smile. Jimmy made a joke about Clint's cowboy days and asked if he still spent time on horseback. The question felt awkward after the weight of their previous exchange, and Clint's response was blunt and terse when needed, leaving no room for the lighthearted banter Jimmy had been trying to elicit from the audience. The audience was nervous and dispersed as they sensed the disconnect between host and guest. Jimmy persisted in trying to regain control of the conversation's direction, but Clint remained firm and refused to be distracted from the topic of his visit. The tension in the studio started to simmer subtly but unmistakably until Jimmy reached behind his desk and produced a prop. A cowboy hat that was obviously intended as a prank, replete with extravagant decorations. Though the audience applauded, believing it to be lighthearted, Clint's response was prompt and clear. Without raising his voice, he murmured, "Put that away," with his eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, saying that it was just for fun, but Clint wasn't having it. "I'm not here for that," he said at a level but firm voice. "I came to talk about the film." The audience didn't know how to react. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others seemed to lean forward, sensing that they were witnessing something raw and unscripted in a world where everything is typically carefully managed backstage. Maggie's suspicions were confirmed when she watched the monitor, and now they were witnessing the consequences unfolding in real time. Jimmy, sensing that control was slipping away, made another attempt to salvage the situation by bringing the conversation back to the movie. But Clint, now fully aware of the game being played, wasn't going to make it easy. "It's about people who don't roll over," he said. His eyes locked on Jimmy's, people who fight back when the world tries to steamroll them and make them into something they're not. The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning beyond just the movie's plot. Some audience members applauded, realizing the double meaning, while others exchanged unsure looks. Jimmy smiled tightly as he nodded, but it was clear that he was uncomfortable. With the tension now obvious, Clint Eastwood was taking a position in real time on live television, and this was no longer just about a movie. It was about the ideals of authenticity versus performance. Clint interrupted Jimmy mid-sentence, demonstrating his patience. "I came here to talk about something real," he said, his voice steady, but full of quiet intensity, so as not to be some sideshow. "For your ratings." Jimmy attempted to change the subject by asking about technical aspects of the film's production, Clint's directing style, or anything else to deflect from the increasingly charged atmosphere. As the tension reached its peak, some audience members nodded in agreement, while others appeared to support Jimmy's more light-hearted approach. Jimmy, caught off guard by the directness of the attack, tried to push back, arguing that entertainment wasn't going to be empty. However, Clint wasn't backing down. Clint's gaze met with Jimmy's as he leaned forward in his chair. He stated calmly, but with a distinct edge, "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive." The studio erupted, in a variety of reactions as he remarked, "I don't need to play games to sell a story that matter." Some spectators yelling in Clint's favor, while others urging Jimmy to maintain his position. The entertainment in the room had entirely changed, giving way to something more basic and authentic. With a strained smile that stopped short of his eyes, Jimmy, who was clearly upset, attempted again to lighten the situation but failed. The power dynamic had changed. Jimmy said, "Hey, we're just having fun here," leaning forward. Clint didn't need to be heaved, but his comments sounded hollow, and he wasn't enjoying himself. He repeated, his voice, which carried decades of power. "You call this amusing to parade people around here and make them look stupid for a few giggles. This isn't about me or my pee. It's about respect for the work, for the audience, for the truth of what we're doing here." The audience fell silent as the tension was high. Jimmy attempted to recover by asking Clint about his favorite roles from the past, but Clint abruptly interrupted him, saying, "You don't get it." Scattered applause broke out along with some murmurs of dissent, the room now clearly divided on. The unfolding drama, the confrontation, escalated as Jimmy, now visibly losing his grip on the situation, tried to appeal to Clint's legendary status look. "Clint, we're just trying to give the fans what they want," he said, gesturing to the audience. "They love you, they want to see the legend." Clint's response was immediate and cutting. "They don't want a clown," he said, his voice low, but carrying to every corner of the studio. They want truth. They want something real in a world that's increasingly fake. The words seemed to hang in the air. The audience now fully engaged in the drama unfolding before them, divided between those cheering for Clint's stance and those booing what they perceived as disrespect toward their host in the control room. Producers frantically debated whether to cut to commercial, but the raw authenticity of the moment kept them from making the call. This was television gold, even if it wasn't the kind they had planned on stage. What's the lesson to be learned from one of the most shocking moments in late-night television? Jimmy stood up, his patience finally wearing thin, and he said, "You want to talk about respect?" His voice rose about respecting the people who invited you here tonight, and the audience erupted again, the division becoming even more pronounced. Clint stood up as well, towering over Jimmy despite his ear. "Respect is earned," he said, his voice calm but powerful, not bought with lights and applause. He then took his microphone, set it on the chair, and left the stage, leaving Jimmy standing, alone amid the confusion of the audience's response. Perhaps this is the case because, in a society where manufactured moments are increasingly valued over genuine expression and spectacle over depth, there is still space for people who refuse to fit in and stick to their morals no matter the cost. Clint Eastwood entered the studio as a legend and left as more of a reminder that integrity isn't just a quality we value in films, but that it can also exist in the real world, even in the glamour of Hollywood. Sometimes real power isn't about controlling the story. It's about being willing to leave it completely, and that may be the most important lesson of all that.